grateful for all of your willingness to be here and serve. But I wanted to start out by just recognizing the reason that I'm in this chair. And that is because we lost a dear colleague last year in Representative Jennings. And for those of you that knew him, you knew that he was incredibly passionate about the criminal justice system and incredibly passionate, especially about juvenile justice system. And so I wanted to take a moment to just recognize him and recognize his contribution to this committee and to the work. He served in this building for over 10 years and passed away this fall after losing a battle to cancer. So again, we'll thank him for his time here, pray for his family, and we'll go ahead and move into introductions if that works for everybody. So we'll start all the way at the end with the one without a name tag, if that works. Representative Howell, if you'll just maybe share your name, where you're from, and your favorite hobby.
I am the interim state representative in Blake Carpenter's place, just while he is gone serving in the military. And District 81, I'm from Derby, and same as Blake. And my favorite hobby is reading. I love to read, so this should be a good job for me, right?
You'll love it.
Hello, my name is Dan Osman. I'm within District 48 in Overland Park. And my favorite hobby, I like games, card games, board games, all types.
Fantastic, thank you.
I'm John Resman. I represent the 121st District, which is the west side of Olathe and Lenexa, and I really don't have a hobby. So,
I'm Cindy Howerton, representative of District 98 down in Wichita, North Hayesville, and my favorite hobby is driving. I love to drive. Yep.
Great.
I'm Representative Patton, 50th District, which is northern and western Shawnee County. Man, who has time for hobbies? I drive my kids around. I go to sporting events. I don't ride. Sporting. I like watching Chiefs and Jayhawks, I guess. I don't do anything myself, but I don't like watching.
There you go. I'm Representative Stephen Owens. I represent the 74th House District in Heston, in rural Harvey County, so north of Wichita, or the county north of Sedgwick County. My favorite hobby is business. I love all things business and entrepreneurship and helping people build businesses and do deals and stuff like that. So go ahead.
Hello, I'm Eric Smith. I'm your vice chair. I'm from Coffee County. I represent all of Coffee County, part of Osage County, and part of Lyon County in the 76th District. I'm the undersheriff down in Coffee County. And I've forgotten what my hobbies are. I haven't done them in so long. 2 full-time jobs will do that. But anyway, I enjoy hunting and fishing. That's what I enjoy.
That is the area just northwest of downtown Wichita. I'm supposed to tell you what my hobbies are. I follow politics like some people follow football. Was there anything else I was supposed to answer, Mr. Chairman? Thank you.
I'm Representative John Wheeler. I'm from District 123 in Garden City, Kansas. It's entirely within the corporate city limits of Garden City. I'm in my 6th year. My hobby was to have been, following my retirement in 2013, golf. But due to a back injury, it is just reading news and watching news.
Yes, I'm David French. I am the state representative for the District 40, which is the city of Lansing and part of the city of Leavenworth. This is my 3rd year. Actually, this is my 4th year on this committee. Probably my favorite committee. We do so much work in here and have such good people that it's always fun to come to this committee. My favorite hobby and my wife's favorite hobby is wine tasting. So if you all need a place to go taste wine, we know all the wineries in Kansas City. So come on over.
All right, and let's go ahead and go to our folks that we have online. Let's start with Representative Keither.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Annie Keither. This is my 26th year in the Kansas Legislature, and my hobby is gardening and forcing orchids to grow and flower.
That's funny. All right, Representative Potter.
My name is Representative Potter Partial. I'm from the 6th District, which is mostly encompasses the majority of Miami County, so just south of Kansas City. My hobby is politics and spending time with my son, and then I also have a daughter due on March 4th.
Well, congratulations. That's fantastic. I don't see Representative Heiberger on, so when he's here next time, we'll have him introduce himself at that time. I definitely want to take the opportunity to have our staff, the brains of the operation, that keep this committee moving, take the minute to introduce themselves. So maybe we'll start with Natalie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Natalie Scott. I work in the Office of Reviser of Statutes, which is the office primarily tasked with drafting the bills and amendments that you guys will be working on this session. This is my 10th session with the office. I think it's my 8th or 9th session on this committee. And assisting me will be Jason Thompson. I'm not sure if he's on the WebEx or not from our office, so he's my backup from our office.
Adriana Pavlik, and what is it?
Okay, thank you. Oh, it's your second day. Welcome.
I am Rachel Smuchler, and I am also an AV tech.
Thank you.
And I am Colette Niehaus, and this is my first session here, and I am the committee assistant.
Hello, I am Meredith Fry. I am the facilitator from Legislative Research.
Hello, I am Lindsay Archer. This is my first session. I am from KLRD and will be here with Meredith.
Wonderful, and I think we have Jason. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason Thompson, Office of Reviser of Statutes, and this is session number 16. Happy to be back with you.
Fantastic. Bob Gallimore, go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Bob Gallimore, also from Legislative Research, like Meredith and Lindsay. This is my 12th session, and I think my 9th or 10th year staffing corrections. I had a few years break here over the last few years as I was in children and seniors, but I'm glad to be back.
Glad to have you. Great. And finally, the last name I see on there is Rachel. That's you. That's what I thought. Great. Just wanted to make sure we didn't miss anybody. Well, thank you all for that. Many of you, it's your first time here, and yes. Okay, he's right here. Yeah, that's all right. We'll get all the bugs worked out. Again, grateful for you guys to be here. I did want to take a minute to review the committee rules. Everybody should have had a packet emailed out. It is our goal in this committee to remain as paperless as possible. For those of you that have been here a while, you realize that in this building, we kill more trees every year than Kansas has. And so we will try to keep that to a minimum, but certainly you're welcome to print things off. As you should have the agenda, you should have all of the information a couple hours ahead of time. So were there any questions regarding the committee rules? They're the exact same thing that we adopted last year, but so we're just going to stick with them for this year. All right, not seeing any questions. Those will be adopted. And as you guys read those, if you do have any questions, by all means ask. Well, we'll move into our work today and want to thank many members of our law enforcement community for being here. That wasn't on my agenda. Thank you, Natalie. This is why Natalie has been here so long, is to help keep people like me in check. Yes, that was not on my agenda, and we want to make sure that that's there. And it'll be a regular part of our agenda, and that is taking any bill introductions. Does anybody have any bill introductions for today? All right, and we'll make sure that's on the agenda going forward. No bill introductions. Okay, moving on. I thought we would start off the committee by having kind of an update from our law enforcement community. As we all know, the last few years have been pretty challenging in the law enforcement world. And so I wanted to start off having the opportunity to hear from leadership from each one of the associations. What I would ask is that any questions that you have, you just say till the end. We'll go ahead and allow these folks to share what's on their mind, and we'll take any questions at the end. So with that in mind, we will start off with the Kansas Sheriff's Association and Sheriff Jeff Easter from Cedric County. Thank you and welcome to the committee. Thank you for being here.
There we go. Good afternoon. Appreciate you giving us the opportunity today to talk about what's kind of going on in law enforcement across the state of Kansas. My name is Jeff Easter. I'm a sheriff of Cedric County, and I represent the Kansas Sheriff's Association today. I know we gave some written testimony here, but I do want to read one paragraph. Like is seen across our great nation, Kansas is facing significant increases in violent crimes. At the same time, law enforcement is facing staffing and operational challenges. Anyone who studies the cause of crime knows the issue is very complex, including influential societal factors outside of the criminal justice system, such as poverty, joblessness, mental health issues, and homelessness. It is also influenced by the ability of the government to bring those who violate the law quickly to justice, especially for the offenses imposing on people's sense of safety and security. When crime goes up, regardless of cause, the entire criminal justice system is challenged with the capacity to quickly respond. From law enforcement to prosecution to the courts, we have seen unprecedented challenges due to the pandemic affecting our staffing and operational limitations, restricting the ability of the entire system to respond in the same timeliness and efficiency as of the past. As a result, the backlog of cases to be investigated, charged, prosecuted, and tried is at levels not previously seen. But we believe the blame for the rise in crime cannot be entirely placed on the pandemic. The rising tide of resistance to government authority, the loss of jobs, the challenges of families to put food on the table and keep a roof on their heads, the resulting increase in mental health issues faced by our citizens with limited mental health treatment resources are all among many other factors leading to those challenges. I would also include that we do have quite a few career criminals that choose to be criminals. That's what they've chosen. There are several things here that we're going to discuss. Myself, Chief Atterbury from the City of Bel Air, who represents the Kansas Chiefs of Police Association, will be speaking today as well. Deputy Chief Paul Scheffel will be speaking for the KPOA. So I'm just going to cover a few issues here from the Sheriff's Association. Bond reform is one of the issues that is being spoken about, and there might be bills on. I understand, or we understand, the need, we believe, more into the assessment aspect of it, in trying to get judges to use a tool to determine bond based upon assessment, what their prior convictions were, what their prior arrests were, what their prior time that they maybe have had encounters with law enforcement. Did they show up for court? What the case or what the charges actually are. The reason that we are concerned with this is we have seen other states and other jurisdictions, large jurisdictions, have started putting into place what they call bond reform. And in those particular areas, you can look up online and read articles about Houston, Texas. Houston, Texas has started doing this with bond reform, not just for nonviolent crimes, also for violent crimes. Folks that are charged with capital murder there have been released on bond, and they have killed other people. There's about 22 incidents of that. Those are things that do not need to take place in Kansas. And so when we talk about bond reform, we have to do it sensibly. We have to do it with also victims in mind for the crimes that these people perpetrated. And so I understand the need, and trust me, my jail is absolutely overcrowded. But what I can tell you at this point with the overcrowding in our jail, it's not for nonviolent crimes. It's not for drug usage. Nobody that has been arrested for drugs is in that jail longer than about 12 hours. They're placed on an OR bond. And so that's not what's filling up our jail. What's filling up the jails across the state is violent crimes and folks that are repeat offenders. And when I say repeat, not just twice, I'm talking 10 to 12 times they've repeated offenses, been convicted, and then they're back out on the streets doing it again. And so we have to, in my opinion, really look at those tools that should be made available to the judges. There's a couple districts that are using them. Johnson County's using it. We're using it. It's trying to get the judges on board to use it, to try to best ascertain who belongs back out on monitoring and who does not, and needs to post a bond. So I just want to make sure and talk about bond reform, that it needs to be sensible. The next thing is, several years ago, there was a bill that was passed in reference to disposition of firearms. In that bill, basically all firearms that we seize and crimes and those type of things have to be sold unless it's used in a murder. The fact of the matter is, we don't believe, and we're going to be introducing a bill to allow law enforcement to destroy those guns that are used in crimes as well. The reason being for that is that in my career, I was with Wichita Police Department for 24 years. When I first came to the police department, we sold weapons. It came to the point where we'd have to etch case numbers on those guns once we collect them, those type of things for evidence purposes. There was guns that had 3 or 4 case numbers on them. It was not uncommon that most of the guns that we were pulling off of criminals had previous WPD case numbers. They were sold and then retained by other criminals who used them. So that practice ended. When this bill went into effect, I believe it was 3 years ago, Wichita Police Department is encountering the exact same thing again. We encounter a lot of guns that are seized by the police department, sold. Yes, it's to a federal firearms licensed dealer, but that can also be a pawn shop. And so these weapons that have been seized in crimes that were committed are now returning to our streets. I don't think it's plausible at all just to say, well, if someone's killed, then that gun can't be sold. We have a case in Cedric County. Her name's Julie Dumbo. She was at a scene where there was a robbery taking place and she was shot. She lost both of her arms. So she came this close to dying. But that gun that perpetuated that crime can be sold back to the public? That makes no sense to me whatsoever. And so we will be proposing a bill that gives law enforcement the opportunity to destroy weapons that are used in crimes like that. The last thing that I'll talk about is mental health concerns. I don't think it's probably anything new that the legislature hasn't heard. We are in dire straits, to be honest with you. Not just from a law enforcement standpoint, from a community standpoint, from our hospitals are overloaded. There is a lot of issues with mental health right now. And we're not talking about people that just have depression and need to go talk to a therapist. These are folks that are in crisis. I talked to the director of Via Christi St. Joe this morning. They have 5 people that are waiting to go to Osawatomie, and their ER, of the 30 people that are in the ER, 16 of which are for mental health issues. 14 of those are sitting out in their lobby right now waiting to be seen. So from a standpoint from law enforcement, what we're seeing is that the state hospital system is improving, but we're far from where we need to be. KDAS has implemented several changes attempting to address these issues, but it's too early to tell if they will address the capacity demands. Emergency commitment processes are still problematic. We still have waiting lists for emergency commitments at Osawatomie. The new program by KDAS to utilize the contract beds is in its early stages, and it remains to be seen if this can produce the additional bed space necessary to meet the demand. What I'll tell you about that is that Via Christi St. Joe is one of those hospitals that is now contracted to be able to treat the folks that normally were sent to Osawatomie, but they still have 5 waiting to go to Osawatomie. And so, yes, they're being reimbursed for the services that they've been doing for years, but the need is still there. The backlog of competency evaluations and restoration remains a very large problem. This causes a large increase in time offenders are in the county jails awaiting trial and creates an additional burden on our jails and on county budgets. Mainly from a law enforcement perspective, that's really what we're going to talk about here. The reason being is that currently right now I have 22 people that are waiting to go to Larned to be assessed. The shortest wait time on the list is 153 days. The longest wait time is 354 days. Osawatomie just put, or not Osawatomie, Larned just put out information that they have cut down their bed space from 90 beds to 62. So what that means is as soon as someone's mental capacity is questioned in the court of law, the judge has no option other than to ask for a evaluation to be done. So all trials stop, and any proceedings will stop at the same time. At that point, then we have to wait for the evaluation to take place by Larned, and then if there needs to be any restoration, the restoration has to then take place. And so the system is really backlogged, is what it comes down to. And I have an individual sitting in the Cedric County Jail for 7 years now. That is, I'm not sure he's actually has mental health issues or more of behavioral issues because he's been back and forth to Larned, but he's charged with a capital murder for the rape and murder and set a female on fire in a park in Wichita. And he has not been to trial yet, and it's been 7 years. And so those are some of the issues. That's not necessarily on Osawatomie because he's been up there and he's been back several times. It's more of an issue of he keeps firing his defense attorneys and prolonging this himself. But those are the things that are taking place within the system. I know those are anomalies, but we're starting to see those anomalies more often. So with that, I would ask for your support in any type of mental health type of bills that come through that would increase funding either to the locals or to any type of regional mental health hospitals in the state. I could talk about this all day long. There's a lot of issues with that too because we need to fix the pipeline of folks that are entering into those career fields to stay in those career fields and also stay in the state of Kansas. Because you can build the buildings, but we don't have the people to do the work. It's very difficult to get anything done. So with that, I will take questions at a later point, but thank you for your time today, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sheriff Easter. Excuse me, we will now hear from Chief Daryl Atterbury from Bel Air Police Department. Chief, welcome.
Well, yes, I'm Daryl Atterbury. I'm Chief of Police for the Bel Air Police Department. I'm here representing the Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police. And I will start off with the parole system in Kansas. We have some concerns. A little bit from an article from about December 7th of last year from KWCH in Wichita, and it says, data shows Wichita is home to nearly 1,200 offenders on parole. Kansas City, Kansas, a city of similar size, has only 91. That's a huge difference. About 50% of, my understanding is about 50% of those people who are in the Wichita area are from the Cedric County area or South Central Kansas. That means the rest of them aren't. That's a huge discrepancy. That impacts crime in Wichita dramatically. It impacts, as Sheriff Easter was saying, our mental health facilities, because a lot of these people out on parole have mental health issues. They are out there committing additional felony crimes, victimizing the citizens in the Wichita, Cedric County area at a disproportionate rate. They shouldn't, our opinion is, be there in the first place. They should be spread out throughout the state or in other places where there are resources so they can get treatment, be followed or attended to. So we would like for you to examine the data, contact whoever needs to be contacted with the KDOC. We know in the past there was a parole board who reviewed each one of these cases and made a decision on each one of these cases instead of blanket time's up, they get to leave the facility and be paroled out. I am not the expert on this, but I know that you people know who the experts are. And we would like for you to do a review on that. The next thing I would like to touch on is some law enforcement staffing and training. Now, like Sheriff Easter, I'm a retiree from the Wichita Police Department. I was there for about 33 and a half years. I've been with the Bel Air Police Department about 7.5 years. I just hit 40 years last October in law enforcement. I've seen a lot from the patrol aspect up through the ranks, left as a captain with the Wichita PD. 4.5 years, I served as an in-service training coordinator for the city of Wichita Police Department, and there were 660 people that I was responsible for getting training. I know a little bit about the training. One of the things that we want to look at, because it's been on the forefront of a lot of discussions in the reform movements, is that there needs to be training. Well, in the state of Kansas, you may or may not know, every officer every year has to get 40 hours of continuing education in some law enforcement topic. And with the oversight of Kansas Post, that's accomplished. There are very few officers who do not get that accomplished. Many states do not have that requirement, but we do here in Kansas because we've been on the forefront of good policing for decades. As a matter of fact, now a lot of states across the nation are looking to us to see how they should do their certifications and training. And I'm going to get in the weeds here a little bit. The training and certification requirement includes including the decertification process has been something that Kansas has been a leader in for a long time. The number of offenses that can strip a law enforcement officer of their certification is about 57, okay? Versus some states who require a felony conviction to be able to decertify an officer. We don't do that here. And it's not a conviction here in the state of Kansas. It's a preponderance of the evidence that that officer committed a violation that could strip them of that certification. And a board meets on a regular basis in Wichita to determine who those officers are. And you can go to the Kansas Post website and get on the what's called the Integrity Bulletin, and you can read about each one of those who've had actions against their certification. I would encourage you to do it. One of the things that we're concerned about is additional trainings that might be imposed on law enforcement in the state of Kansas, and that is because we have limited staff. I used to be on a department with 660 people. Now I'm on a department with 13, including me. And to require a lot of training and above what's already there can be a very large burden, you know, logistically, financially. It is problematic for us. The other thing I want to talk about is retention of officers. Over the last few years, up until 2021, the middle of 21, I had 2 open positions. I could not find a qualified person to come and through my door to hire, at least to the standards we have set. And that's a myriad of reasons for that, but we've tried to create incentives through our city has created an incentive pay program based on their yearly evaluation to give a bonus for people who perform well so we could give them an incentive to stay. But not everybody can do that. Many law enforcement officers and corrections staff, because we have to remember that corrections is part of law enforcement too, they're overloaded with work to do because they're short-staffed. We're seeing that in other public sector occupations too. Mental health, hospitals, doctors, nurses. It's not just law enforcement, but we want to let you know that retention is an issue, and we don't want things that will inhibit our ability to retain employees. Some of the things that we would like for you to look at is the DROP program, as it has to do with KPNF employees. It works. It can be a benefit. And I can tell you personally, when I have people come through the door looking for employment, one of the first questions they ask, if they're familiar with Kansas law enforcement or Kansas public employee type of employment, are you KPERS or KPNF? And I've had people leave because my department currently has KPERS. They want a KPNF retirement. They certainly don't want a Tier 3 KPERS. It's not walking out the door, then they run out the door. So that's the other thing we would like for you to look at is the disparity between KPNF and regular KPERS, and then especially with Tier 3. If there was just a way to move all those Tier 3 law enforcement officers, corrections officers up to Tier 2, that'd be maybe a good start, but just an idea. Some of the things that have been out in the media over the last couple of years with law enforcement reform, we would like for you to know our opinion on, because these we feel are counterproductive and even harmful to the officers who are out trying to do the best thing that they can for their communities. We all want officers who are well-trained and they try to do the best thing they can, the right time at the right reason, the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. We don't want overzealous officers. But that said, we want you to give no consideration to removing qualified immunity from law enforcement in the state of Kansas. That is something that protects you and it protects us. We are also opposed to additional reporting requirements. Many reform advocates want some type of increased reporting requirements, stop studies, reporting every contact we have with a person that's not another police officer. And that's just there to tie our hands so that we can't go meet other good people in our communities. If I have to report it, am I going to go and talk to another citizen? Because some of these advocates want us to report every single contact we have. I talked to Mr. Owens in the Quick Trip. I've got to go back out to my car and fill out my little document that says I had a citizen contact. That's ridiculous. We want you to oppose those. So with that, I will stand for questions later. And I appreciate the opportunity to come speak with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Atterbury. I might mention, excuse me, that Tuesday we'll be hearing from the Kansas Department of Corrections, and I've specifically asked them to address the parolee issue in Cedric County on Tuesday, so you might tune in for that meeting. Absolutely. All right, now we're pleased to hear from Deputy Chief Paul Schlifke. Paul, welcome.
Outstanding pronunciation. I appreciate that.
Certainly.
My name is Paul Schlifke. I'm the Deputy Chief of Wamego. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today representing the Kansas Peace Officers Association. The KPOA represents over 3,000 law enforcement professionals, local, state, federal, and including some of the civilian employees such as dispatchers. But we're kind of known for representing the line officers, so I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. One of the things that we wanted to share with you was to speak about security at Larned State Hospital. And so I contacted Sheriff Scott King of Pawnee County, who I figured would have some expertise on the matter, and he certainly does. John Colt, determined to be a sexual predator in 2006, escaped from Larned State Hospital on June 30th of last year. He remained at large for 3 months until he was apprehended in Utah with the assistance of the United States Marshal's Office. Isaac Watts, who was being held on an attempted murder charge as well as other charges, escaped from Larned State Hospital January the 3rd. He was arrested the following day in Garden City. Now, we recognize that Governor Kelly has ordered a security review of Larned State Hospital, which we certainly support. But Sheriff King asked me to pass along several of his comments, which I told him I wanted to do. Sheriff King has knowledge of Larned State Hospital. He started 36 years ago as a Pawnee County deputy sheriff, and he said that the recent escapes have him the most concerned about Larned State Hospital, or LSH, if you don't mind if I refer to it as that he has ever been. He said years ago that LSH officers were commissioned law enforcement officers. They attended the Kansas Law Enforcement Training facility. They were commissioned. However, over the years, officers have lost tools to protect themselves, other staff, and also the public by preventing escapes. They're no longer commissioned. They're no longer armed. He says he doesn't believe they carry pepper spray anymore, and he doesn't even know if they carry handcuffs anymore. And he's concerned about the training or the lack of training for the security personnel. He provided several examples to support his concern. He said that for one audit, there are certain doors that are supposed to be checked every 2 hours. And he said that one audit showed a door was open for 19 hours. And then several days ago, just after the most recent escape, he was notified that they were having an emergency head count because there was one of those doors that was open for 10 minutes. And he acknowledged that LSH treats people in mental health crises. However, he says, while they may classify those people as patients, which some are, or all of them are, many of the patients are inmates. And he said, I'm just not sure if they understand the seriousness or the violence of some of the folks that are being brought out there. And recently, he was contacted by another Kansas sheriff who's housing a prisoner accused of murder, and the sheriff said, this guy's having a mental health crisis. I want to bring him down there. However, I'm really concerned about the security. And he said that while security at Larned State Hospital affects the citizens of Pottawatomie County, it also affects the citizens of Kansas. So I told him I would be happy to pass along those comments. I also wanted to speak about Kansas juvenile justice reforms. And in 2017, changes were made to the way that Kansas treats juvenile offenders. One change most notable to law enforcement was to reduce the number of juveniles placed into secure facilities. And for the majority of juvenile offenders, this has been a good thing. It's been successful because most offenders do not require secure placement. And for certain minor offenses, law enforcement can even fill out what we call a juvenile notice to appear form. And basically, we say, okay, this was a speed bump. We're going to set up an appointment for you and your parent to meet with a juvenile intake officer at a later date. And that's worked out well. There has been some concern from some law enforcement about what happens if they do not show up. So that has been a concern. However, for the small number of juvenile offenders who require secure placement to protect themselves or the public, the 2017 reform has presented challenges. There's a standard form used statewide, the Kansas Detention Assessment Instrument, KDIA, and it's used by juvenile intake on a scoring pattern to show if the juvenile offender needs secure placement or not. Now, standardization is good, but there are instances based on this form, such as a child commits a serious offense but has no other criminal record, where it can score below the rating of the need for secure placement. Another example would be if it's a child who's a repeat offender, he's intaked, goes home, offends, intake, goes home, offends, and they're minor enough offenses that even though has shown a pattern, he's still not being placed in a secure facility. And these are some of the concerns that law enforcement officers in different jurisdictions have shared with me. And also, the other thing about juvenile, as you folks all know, there's secure placement needed for different reasons. There's criminal offenses. There's children in need of care that sometimes need secure placement. And there's also mental health, which bleeds over. It's not just adults, it's also for juveniles. And that's something that was also brought to my attention in some jurisdictions, that even if there is a bed open, which many times there aren't, by the time that the juvenile gets treatment, it's been so long that either he or she has already been released, or they feel that the system has let them down and they've already shut down. So I think those are some important things that I should share with you. And some of the statute wording has caused an issue. KSA 38-2202 has different definitions for secure facility, which are SINC, child in need of care, juvenile detention facility, which are offenders only, and shelters, which are temporary placement for children in need of care. KSA 38-2260 in part allows for a court to issue an ex parte order to be held in a secure facility or a juvenile detention facility if the court finds probable cause the child violated the court's order for placement without good cause. However, KSA 38-2288 states in part, no child alleged or found to be a child in need of care may be placed in juvenile detention facility unless the child is also alleged to be a juvenile offender, and such placement is authorized by 38-2330 or 38-2343. These are not numbers I looked up just to fill my presentation. These are frustrations that officers have shared with me, primarily from larger jurisdictions. And one comment that was made to me was, I've had my boss look at it, the DA look at it, DCF look at it, juvenile intake look at it, and there's 4 people interpreting these statutes differently. So one thing that we would respectfully request, the statutes be tweaked to ensure they do not conflict with each other, and to allow us, DCF, juvenile intake courts, and other stakeholders to work together for the benefit of the child. And I already talked about a little bit about a lack of bed space, and both short-term and long-term. And in summary, I just want to say that overall the 2017 reform is a positive change, but like many changes, there are a few things that could improve the purpose of the reform, which is to improve the needed services to children in Kansas. And with that, I appreciate your time and attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chief. Finally, we'll be pleased to hear from Brian Clark, President of the Kansas State Troopers Association.
Thank you for inviting me here. We've provided some written testimony, but as you can read through that, but I'm just going to kind of summarize that for you. My name is Brian Clark. I'm a trooper with the Kansas Highway Patrol. I'm also the president of the Kansas State Troopers Association. I kind of offer a different of insight from what these gentlemen offer you. They are in charge of large departments, large number of people. On a day-to-day basis, I'm in charge of my dog. That's it. So I kind of offer from the ground level as far as law enforcement. Your vice chair, just a few weeks ago, I was at a standoff with him, and I think he even got to pet my dog. But from our aspect as the Kansas State Troopers Association, the governor last night has asked for significant raises. In 2015, the legislators worked with our administration and us, and we enacted the pay progression plan, which was a great item, but however, that's only seen a 2.5% increase since then. We have fallen so sharply behind larger municipalities that we are not competitive with them. And you could see this, and if you ask these gentlemen from the back, do you see that many highway patrolmen anymore? They're going to tell you the response from the highway patrol is really lessened. And so that's our main goal is definitely to see the pay increase. But also the governor has put it in her budget for aircraft. One thing about the highway patrol is we are the only state law enforcement agency or the only ones in the state that have aircraft, and our aircraft is extremely outdated, and it's in dire straits. We are to the breaking point where there's several times where aircraft is not available. We're the only ones in the state that have them. And I want to give a little example of how important our aircraft is. Last summer, we believed we had a homicide suspect from Nebraska. We believed he was at Banner Lake in Jackson County, but then we got a tip that he might be in Jefferson County. We used our aircraft to find the vehicle that he was in. Subsequently, a police car chase happened. He ended up shooting at a couple of troopers, and they responded back. But I say how important that is because this was an extremely violent man that came to our state from another state. He would have never been found without the aircraft usage. It was summertime, it was full foliage in Lake Perry. That wouldn't have happened had we not had that asset. We are in dire need of that asset. We can talk about Wichita and they need some aircraft support down there. And not only do we respond to those areas, but we respond throughout the state, and that includes everything. That includes when a small town police department needs help with traffic control, we're the ones there to help. When a sheriff's office needs help with a barricaded subjects, we're there to help. The problem is our numbers are getting so low that the time it's taking for us to get there is taking way too long. So I'll stand, since I'm the last, do you want me to stand for questions or?
Sure, we'll do that. I know last year in the budget, we were really close to getting your aircraft, and by Joe, I even thought we had your aircraft, and then at the very last minute, it was taken out. So it's back in the budget this year, and hopefully we can get that done for you guys. Committee members, do we have any questions? We'll open it up to any of the four members who have presented to us.
Mr. Chairman.
We'll start with Representative Keither.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't find the raise hand thing on this thing, but anyway.
You're all right.
I have one question for Paul Schlifke about the KSA numbers that you cited. I am on the Judicial Council Sync Committee, so that might be a concern that we bring up in a meeting.
And can we turn the volume up a little bit, please?
Certainly.
Too many years on the range. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am, your question again.
You cited a couple of KSA numbers, and I'd like to have those numbers. I serve on the Sync Committee for the Judicial Council, so it might be something we would be addressing.
Okay, so you'd like the case numbers that I referred to? Yes, ma'am, and thank you for asking. I referred to KSA 38-2202, and that has the different definitions for a secure facility, juvenile detention facility, and shelter facilities. And then I referred to KSA 38-2260, and then 38-2288. And actually, the other two case numbers are in 38-2288. Those are referred to in that case. And
thank you very much.
You're welcome. And again, the concern from the officers I spoke with was that, and those can be interpreted differently and they may be in conflict with each other.
Well, we should look at it then. That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have one other quick question
Certainly.
for Daryl Atterbury. You talked about staffing and training concerns, but I'm not quite sure what you're asking for. I just didn't understand.
Well, just to let you know that we are having staffing issues, and some of those have to do with pay, with retirement from somebody coming in at the beginning. They're looking at the end of their career. So that's the staffing part. The training part is that we would ask that no further training be imposed on law enforcement in the state of Kansas, other than what we already have, because we now get 40 hours of continuing ed every year with some mandated training from the state.
Well, and also your concern regarding Tier 3. I'm on the Joint Committee on Pensions and Benefits and Investments, and we had a long conversation about Tier 3, and I know that they are taking a long, hard look at Tier 3 in that committee, in the Pensions Committee this session. So you might want to go over there and talk to some folk on that committee before much longer, because I think it's something that will be talked about very carefully this year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly, I wanted to maybe mention, I was under the impression that it was the city or the county that you work for's decision as to whether you were a member of KPNF or CAPERS, because they're the ones that bear the brunt of the cost. Am I incorrect in that?
Well, for me, it is our city. Okay. Now, I will say that KPNF, the retirement system in the state of Kansas, KPNF/CAPERS, they've done a lot to help us out over the last few years. It used to be that if a city wanted to transfer their I'll just leave it with law enforcement, from CAPERS to KPNF, there was a huge monetary outlay to make up for the accruals of the past that hadn't been realized. That's no longer the case. Now we can switch over more easily, though there is still a monetary outlay or an impact to a city's or an organization's budget. It is not anything near what it used to be. For instance, when I took over in Bel Air, for my 13-officer department, it was going to be about $1.2 million to buy into KPNF from CAPERS. And now, because of the way it's set up and the vesting period for officers, it'll be probably under 100,000. And then there'll be members of CAPERS in the past and KPNF in the future, as I understand it.
All right, thank you for that. Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don't go too far, Daryl. I've got a question for you. And while you're walking up there, I do my disclaimer of interest or whatever. I'm still an active member of KPOA, and you cash my check. I'm not sure my membership status is still legit for active, but no, it's fine. It's fine. The check cleared, but I've at least disclosed the interest. Daryl, you and I started maybe me 2 or 3 years before you in this kind of general line. I can't believe it's been 40 years, man.
It has.
It really has. A number of our friends, maybe even you, took the drop and gone to other departments, and I support the drop. I think it's a wonderful idea. I wish I would have become a law enforcement officer instead of a lawyer so I could have taken the drop. But can you explain to us what the drop is and how it works? Because I'm not sure all of us know what that DROP drop means.
And I am the wrong guy to do an in-depth explanation of this, but it's called the Deferred Retirement Option Plan. The way it worked for me is that for every year I stayed past a point, the city would take my retirement check that I would have gotten and they put it into a fund. And then at the end of my drop program, my period of time, then I retire and then I would get that as a lump sum check. The mechanism for how that works, I don't fully understand. I just know that it really worked out well for me. And my understanding is it's revenue neutral, so it doesn't impact, it won't impact the state financially, other than to the administrative costs to make it happen.
And one of the things that it helps to accomplish is to retain experienced officers who have a number of years on a department, and it encourages them to stay with that department, generally in upper management, middle management positions. I think that's a big part of that deal.
That would be correct. And I can tell you, I certainly stayed with Wichita a little bit longer because of the benefit that I was going to realize in just a short few years down the road.
Yeah, we've got a mutual friend who's now got 42 years on the street, believe it or not. And
Yes,
that's
he
part
does.
of why Bob is still out there, I think. Someday he deserves it. I have some other questions, Mr. Chair, whenever it's the appropriate time.
Oh, you're fine, go right ahead.
Okay, I do have a question for Mr. Clark. In your written testimony, you make reference to Troop K, the Capitol Police.
Yes.
And as you know, there have been pay disparities between Troop K Capitol Police officers and other troops, road patrol officers. I think some that's been evened out now. There have also been okay, well, that's why I'm asking, because I want to figure out where we're at. And there's also problems with advancement opportunities for Troop K officers, the people who take care of us. I think generally they're limited to technical trooper type position and never get beyond captain. But can you explain what's going on with Troop K and what we can do to make sure the people who protect us here are treated like other highway patrol officers, both in terms of pay as well as advancement opportunities with the patrol?
Yes, and I'm extremely grateful that you ask. Troop K is the Capitol Police. They're the ones you see every day as you come through the doors. They're the ones who walk around here. They're not only here, but they're at Cedar Crest or other state buildings. They are a division of the Highway Patrol. They're considered Capitol Police officers. They're Law Enforcement 1, Law Enforcement 2, Law Enforcement 3. They're not of what they consider as the rank of a trooper. They still, for the past several years, now attend the academy in Salina. So with the last class, we had 5 graduate. One of those was the Capitol Police officers. Their pay is about 7.5% less than the troopers, than the same people that they went through the academy with. I do not know why, and it's extremely frustrating. Last year was a bill set forward to get that evened out, and it was vetoed at the last minute.
With your permission, Mr. Chair, so if you go to work for patrol and you end up on Capitol Police and you're trained in a very specialized area, I mean, this is a soft target and a very important target. These people have specialized skills. Am I correct, though, that you don't really have the same advancement opportunities, that you're basically limited to no higher than the equivalent of a lieutenant?
That's correct. So even though they go through the same academy, receive the same training as us, when they come here to the Capitol Police, they are here. The highest level they can get at this time is a lieutenant. They can't go any further than that, despite having the same. Now, they don't get the same opportunities as a trooper either. They don't get the opportunity to apply for canine, for aircraft, for SRT, anything of that nature. Now,
SRT?
I'm sorry, Special Response Teams, okay? That, another layman term would be our SWAT team, okay? They don't get to apply for being an operator. Now, we do have a Capitol Police officer that is a negotiator, and I think that is very well served here in the Capitol, because I couldn't do their job day in and day out. They are some of the nicest. They have to be more diplomatic than anybody I know with some of the people that come in here to see you guys. But they're the ones here that's protecting you. And for some reason, they are not paid the same as we are. And we've tried for years to get them to the same level. And we have been met with roadblock after roadblock after roadblock.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think it's beyond obscene what's going on. I do have one other question for Sheriff Easter at the appropriate time. I want to make sure my colleagues get their bite of this apple.
Certainly. Any other questions from other members of the committee?
Chairman?
Oh, go ahead, Representative Howerton.
I have a question for Sheriff Easter also. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to thank you. First off, I am from Wichita. I hear excellent things about you and your officers. When you were talking, and forgive my ignorance, I do not want to sound condescending or ignorant. Anyway, you were talking about the guns, getting rid of guns that were involved in violent crimes. So what is the difference between getting rid of guns and violent crimes and just getting rid of guns? What's the difference in the gun?
You mean that are seized and in our custody?
Yes.
Okay, so when we talk about crimes that involve violent crimes, that's your robberies, if a gun is used in a rape, a shooting, those type of things. We don't believe that those guns should be returned to the public in any form or fashion, sold, those type of things. For me personally, I think any gun used in a crime, no matter what the crime, shouldn't be given back, but I don't want to ask too much of the legislation or the legislators.
I'm just trying to figure out why there's a difference in a gun, because a gun's a gun.
It is.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Smith?
Sheriff Easter, maybe to your point, guns that are seized as a part of, say, a burglary search warrant, that would be a different situation because those belong to somebody they were taken from.
Those are returned now, yes.
That would be the difference, you think, then?
Well, I think that would be the difference. I think the difference also is folks that have their guns stolen out of cars that they personally own. Those guns are returned, those type of things, or could be sold. They weren't necessarily used in a crime. Folks that, I will tell you with the sheriff's office, unlike the police department back home, most of the guns that we take off of people is because they are felons in possession. Now, when they get back out, will they probably get another gun? Yes, they normally do. But I still don't believe that the gun that we seized from them should be recirculated in the public. For the Wichita Police Department, most of their guns are involved in violent crimes that they seize. It's just, I know it's a gun debate, and I get that, but these are guns that were used in crimes. And so why recirculate those back to the community, which we already know is happening, and it makes it less of a, or folks have a harder problem getting those weapons back.
All right, Representative Heiberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Sheriff Easter.
Certainly.
I've heard the concern about the backlog for mental health screening from our judges here. Do you have a preferred solution to that problem?
The backlog for what again, sir? I'm sorry?
For the mental health screening?
Yeah, so right now, I know last year, Larned State Hospital worked with Shawnee County up here to bring individuals from Larned to their jail to start doing some of those off-site evaluations. We have talked to them about that as well, or they have talked to us here in Cedric County about that as well. With some of your bigger jurisdictions, I think that is plausible, and it is a something that would work. The problem is they're so short-staffed now, they're not able to do it. And so, but we have, this really affects sheriff's offices because we're housing these folks while they're waiting for treatment or for the evaluation. And so we have individuals across the state that might only have one or two prisoners that are awaiting, but they're a 10-person jail. And so it's all relative to kind of where we're at. One of the solutions, I would like to see if this would work, but there's no way I don't think that the state can have individuals going to all these jails across the state to do what they've done in Shawnee County and what they're proposing to do in Cedric County. And I will say it, I've said it numerous times, the mental health system is overloaded. It is not working correctly. And when the state of Kansas did reform back in the 90s, it was to get people closer to their family while they're going through these crises. And so, but the money didn't follow, plain and simple. And so it's time to take a look at the mental health system here and look at regional type of hospitalizations, which also keeps people closer to home, but it will also help with, say you put one in the, somewhere in South Central Kansas, whether it's Newton, Wichita, wherever, 5 counties that are dealing with this problem, or 6 counties, whatever it would be, would have a regional hospital for folks to send to that hospital for evaluation. Again, that sounds great, but you got to find the people to work in there too. So there's other issues that can affect that, but we have other ideas on how to build a pipeline of individuals that are willing to do that work and stay in the state of Kansas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Carmichael, I believe you had a question for Sheriff Easter. Okay, I didn't see it. Representative French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the consensus is that there's a staffing problem in our law enforcement. And I kind of want to know, is raising salaries the only answer to that, or is there other options? Like, I just had a school board member contact me about substitute teachers, and they want us to lower the standards for those teachers to be able to teach. I don't think you want to lower your standards, and I hope not anyway, but what are the other options besides just pay increases? Thank you.
I'll just kind of briefly, raises are not the only thing. It is, yes, we are different agencies such as the Highway Patrol has talked about their agency. My agency isn't in comparison with other agencies. A lot of folks aren't. We have to be in comparison to agencies in around our area, or we don't get people. I'm in direct competition with the police department, who pays a lot more. So raises are part of that issue. I think another big part, to be honest with you, is what you guys do in legislation up here. And if you, some of the stuff that is coming out of the governor's commission and task force will decimate us as a law enforcement entity, plain and simple. And so a lot of folks that are looking to get into law enforcement, which is less right now because of everything that's going on, are also paying attention to those type of things. And why would you want to be involved in something that I don't mind the fact, and I think it's a good thing with the body cameras. I'm a supporter of body cameras, and here's the reason why. Is because it does hold our folks accountable, and secondly, it holds them accountable. Because I get complaints nonstop from folks that claim false claims. And what was happening before, we had no camera footage. Or if we did, it was a clip taken from a cell phone that didn't show everything, only what they wanted to show us. And so if you want to talk about a profession that is the most scrutinized profession in the entire United States, that's law enforcement. I'm not making excuses for it. I'm not saying that it's wrong, but it is the most scrutinized. And if you think you can hold up to that scrutiny on every word that you say, that's why we don't have people applying to be in law enforcement, because everything that they say will be interpreted a different way. I will say this, I think social media is the villain of our current time, because anybody that says something, it gets put out there on the internet and is taken as truth, and it might have that much truth to it. And so those are the things that are preventing us from really, we get some people to apply. Are they quality? No, they're not. I got 6 positions to hire for in a class coming up in February. You know how many people we had apply for 6 positions? 15. 6 years ago, would have had 150. So that should tell you where we're at. And then when you look at corrections, it's even worse, because they're paid less, and it's an extremely difficult job inside those jails. So it's not all about pay, but it's important what goes on up here.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the #1 priority of the state ought to be public safety. And I just don't think we're putting our public law enforcement with the right tools they need to make sure that we are safe in this state. I think we're losing that rapidly. So I appreciate whatever y'all can do to keep the standards up. And I appreciate y'all being here today. It's good to see. Like I said, I think it's very important that we know your issues, that we can try to address those in the coming session. Thank you. Go ahead.
I was going to say, pay is not the utmost, but pay is important. When I have people come through the door in my organization, and I hope I don't have to do it in the near future, to try to hire somebody else because it has been difficult, they ask about pay. They ask about the hours of work. Those things I can't change the hours too much, but we have, because we did an in-depth look. It's not just 3 shifts. We've got some overlap shifts, and we tried to accommodate creatively the hours of work that people could work for us so that we could get that good person through the door. Not to change their hours, but just to get them through the door so we could have that additional employee. We're looking at incentive pays because pay is important, but it's based on performance. So we're trying to be creative with how we're policing these days. Equipment is important. If you have crappy equipment, nobody's going to want driving that 150,000 mile patrol car. They want something newer, better. And it's not because it's just newer or better, because it's safer. Anything past about 80,000 miles, 50,000 if you're a trooper. It starts causing some concerns, and people who have been in law enforcement know that. You know, the tie rods go bad, and the suspension starts to get pretty rough, and nobody wants to go into a department that has old bad equipment. So equipment is part of that. They like to be respected in the community. So we try to get our officers out, and most departments do. Try to get their officers out for fishing clinics, for community events. So we're trying to do those things that are not just pay-oriented, but give them a sense of satisfaction beyond that of pay and compensation that make the job worthwhile.
Great answer. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly, thank you. Oh, no, go right ahead. If you've got, you go right ahead.
I just wanted to point out law enforcement is a calling. I have about a year on Chief Atterbury, and when I was first an officer, I would have paid to do it. And it is a calling, and that's one thing that we're trying to figure out these days, is because society has changed, people's attitudes towards things have changed, and that's a struggle for us. But it is, but that is one thing that we're trying to work on, trying to figure out how to get around. And thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You got, certainly.
You know, for us, it's really different for employees. And I want to give you a prime example. On Christmas, the state employees were given Christmas Eve as a paid holiday. Every single trooper that was out working on Christmas Day did not get holiday pay. They got holiday pay for Friday. They didn't get it for Saturday. It was for the Monday through Friday people, not through the weekend people. Those are little things that we can change at the state level. We talk about if somebody's out or somebody works overtime, because we have a lot of overtime available right now. If you work overtime on a Monday or Tuesday and your kid's sick on a Friday or the Friday of the next week, you lose that overtime. You don't get paid overtime. You have 80 hours that you have to fill first before you get overtime. So there's a little things that we can change at the state level that will make it a lot better. So,
Thank you. Representative Howell.
Yes, I had a couple questions for Sheriff Easter, if he doesn't mind. My being quiet didn't last long. I'm so sorry. So just since I'm brand new to this, one thing that it sounded like, and I just want you to clarify, is it sounds like our psychological evaluations are only done by state employees, psychiatrists, I assume? Is my understanding correct?
Yes, it's workers with the master's degree to be able to do psychological evaluations. We're fortunate in Cedric County. We have ComCare there, which is very robust. They do a lot of evaluations for us. But folks that need restoration and they know it right up front, those folks is who we're sending to Larned. If we didn't have that, I would probably have 60 to 70 people on the waiting list right now.
And can you explain the word restoration to me?
Yes. So once somebody has been declared incompetent through the evaluation, then they're housed at Larned, and then they do restoration services such as therapy, those type of things to get them to the point where, and medication, to get them to the point where they can provide their own defense, is what it comes down to. If someone is not mentally capable of providing their own defense, then they're mentally incompetent to stand trial.
Then my other question would be, is there legally anything in the law that keeps us from using private psychiatrists to help provide those services? Is it money?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything on a state statute wise, but yeah, it would cost, and probably cost more than what Larned costs.
Right, that makes sense. Then I had two questions about your advocacy for the gun destruction. Just to clarify, one, it sounded to me like you felt like the pawn shops in particular maybe were, for lack of a better term, like not as kosher of a source to get a gun. I'm not sure if I'm representing what you said accurately, so I just kind of wanted you to clarify that. And then I also wanted to ask, I assume that pawn shops are required to have an FFL to sign a license, and anybody buying a gun from the pawn shop is required to have a background check, just like everybody else.
That's correct. So a lot of times, it's not the pawn shops per se. It's not those folks that are causing the issues. It's the folks that want to get the gun. They are prohibited. Well, they just go get their neighbor or their girlfriend or their boyfriend. They go apply for it and back, they have the gun again. My whole thing is that's going to happen anyway. But why reintroduce a gun that was in our custody, used in a crime, back into that mix?
Okay, and then one last question, so sorry, I know I had a list. Then my other question was, I wanted to ask you to clarify, you're advocating for destroying guns that are used in crimes in general, not necessarily violent crimes or first-person crimes, is that correct?
For crimes in general, yes, ma'am.
All right, I just wanted to understand, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The good news is that Representative French covered my major question. I would suggest, though, Mr. Chairman, this matter at Larned State Hospital, this sexually violent treatment program, et cetera, I hope that this committee will have time to call the people up here so that we can hear from the horse's mouth not only administration, but also the sheriff, et cetera, because I think it warrants a lot more time than we have here today. That being said, Sheriff Easter, I'm really glad you're my sheriff. I want to make sure that you understand that. You alluded to the KWCH, I believe, story regarding the number of parolees that were released into Sedgwick County, or maybe Chief Atterbury did. Don't go too far. Tim Potter of the Eagle, one of his last stories was about the very same issue. And one of the things it focused on is the state Department of Corrections Work Release Center is in Wichita, Kansas, and I think it's about the only one, I believe it's the only one in the state. Can either one of you comment on how that impacts my community when the only place that people get work release is in my town and not, who's from Kansas City, not in their town, so to speak?
How that impacts your community is a lot of your community members are now victims of crime from parolees. Those people who are committing violent crimes. Other parolees are victims of crime from the people who are housed with them. We're seeing new crimes all the time. We've had some homicides in Wichita that have happened because of the number of people. Absconders, people who leave the facility and don't come back. And then they're out in our community, you know, skulking around, committing crimes, because a lot of people, that's their nature. They're not going out to get a job at Quick Trip to help cash you out after you've picked up your stuff. They're not doing that. They're stealing catalytic converters. They're doing burglaries. They're committing robberies. They're harming other people. That's how it's impacting your community members, our community members. And we would like to, we're not trying to push it. These are people who need help. They've done, most of them have done their time. They've gotten their opportunity to be out, but they're not using it the way you, as legislators, have intended them to use it. They've gone out and they're committing crimes. So
I think part of the problem is about 50% of those work release people are Sedgwick County originally place of conviction. But then that other 50%, we put them in a work release program. They now have a job in Wichita, and hence they all end up staying there until they get arrested again. And I'm trying to advocate for sending people lots of places in the state to get trained, hopefully closer to their friends, not their friends, but their family, their legitimate community connections. And it looks to me like what we've got is just an import program to bring more trouble for you in Bel Air and the sheriff in the county and frankly me at night when somebody's outside my house.
The part of the question you didn't ask is, why is there only one?
Yes.
And why is there only one in Wichita instead of being somewhere else in the state so we could farm them somewhere else? And the term that's been used is parolee dumping.
Exactly.
They've been dumped in Wichita because of the services are there. But again, the question is, where's the funding for services in another place that could also house that other 50% that aren't from the Cedric area?
Thank you for pointing out my oversight. The final thing is, Sheriff Easter, I appreciate you having the courage to make your remarks regarding the governor's commission. I think you spoke about those nice folks. I disagree with a whole bunch of what they're doing, and I appreciate law enforcement officers who are willing to stand up and say it. Thanks.
Thank you. I would only add one more thing to your question, sir. One of the things that you have to also realize, and that's why I'm very cautious about bail reform, is there's also been reform in the parole and probation arena. And that reform is parolees they have sanctions placed against them that say you can't do this, you have to be home by curfew, you can't drink, you can't do drugs, those type of things. So when we hear people talk about, well, they just need a second chance. I would agree on a first-time offender that they need a second chance. But how many times can they violate their parole and still be within our community? That's a big problem, folks. There is, unless they're charged with the crime right then and there, they're not going to be violated. We can find somebody that has an ounce of meth in their pocket and they will not be violated because they're not charged. Well, it takes us almost 6 months to get the test results back to even charge the case. So that's with dope found on their person. But the amount of times that we in law enforcement find that they are violating their parole and the sanctions of their parole and nothing is done about it. And so we know some folks that, have had 7 or 8 chances with those sanctions. And then finally they're violated. And it's usually after a crime that they've committed and we've charged the crime within 72 hours while they're in custody. So those are things that we have to take a look at. And I understand, I've been doing this up here long enough that KDOC is our partners. They have a job to do as well, and they're overcrowded. And so some of this stuff gets done by policy, some of it gets done by state statute, but in the end, who's suffering? The victims of those crimes. And a lot of times, those victims are speaking through us to talk to you. And so just understand that there's been a huge change in the way parole and probation is handled in the state of Kansas.
But meanwhile, we seem to revoke people pretty darn frequently for not registering in 3 different counties at the same time. I think you testified in front of this committee a year or so ago on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sheriff.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for raising some of those concerns, Sheriff. Gives us some conversation to have with KDOC when we see them on Tuesday. Well, with that being it, gentlemen, on behalf of a very grateful committee, a grateful State House, and a grateful people, we thank you for being here. We thank you for your service. And we would ask that you bring that to the attention of your rank and file and let them know that they're greatly appreciated. We're blessed to have a couple of fantastic law enforcement officers on our committee, but the people down that work in the trenches need to know that we support them and we're aware of them. And so thank you for being here and representing them and pass that message to them. At this time, if there's nothing else, we'll be adjourned.